Beneath the moon's silver sickle, a lone wolf's howl fractured the silence, echoing the shatter of a heart cast into the wilds. Alara's boots crunched through the brittle crust of snow as the wind clawed at her threadbare cloak, whispering cruelties she had long learned to ignore. The forest of eldritch pines stretched like skeletal guardians under the perpetual twilight of the northern peaks, their branches heavy with ice that wept in slow, crystalline drips. She was 23 winters old, an omega whose scent had once promised warmth to a pack, but now it marked her as prey, faint, fading, like the last embers of a fire stamped out in haste. Rejection had come not with fangs or fury, but with the cold decree of exile uttered by the alpha whose bed she had warmed for a single, foolish moon cycle. "You are no mate for a warrior," Thorn had growled, his eyes averted as if her very presence shamed him. The pack had gathered in the great hall of Ironfang Hold, the air thick with the musk of fur and forge smoke, while torches flickered shadows across stone walls etched with the scars of ancient battles. Alara remembered the weight of their stares, pity from the betas, disdain from the warriors, as Thorn's beta enforcer stripped her of the woven bracelet that symbolized her place among them. It was a simple thing, threads of silver and crimson dyed in blood oath, but its removal burned deeper than any claw. "The goddess has no claim on weakness," the enforcer had intoned, his voice a ritual chant that sealed her fate. Banished for her frail spirit, they called it, though the truth festered unspoken. Thorn's new consort, a fierce she-wolf from the rival Stormclaw clan, demanded purity in her union. Alara, with her quiet ways and dreams that spoke of hidden paths, was the stain to be erased. She had stumbled from the hold at dusk, the gates clanging shut behind her like the jaws of a beast. The snow had begun then, fat flakes that blurred the world into white oblivion, mirroring the fog in her chest. Her breath came in shallow gasps, visible plumes that twisted away on the gale, carrying fragments of her scent into the void. The cold seeped through her moccasins, numbing toes she could no longer feel, but it was nothing compared to the ache where her heart should have been. What was an omega without a pack? A whisper in the wind, a shadow fleeing the moon's judgmental light. Deeper into the wilds she pressed, the path vanishing beneath drifts that swallowed her tracks. The pines gave way to jagged outcrops where frost clung to rock like desperate fingers. Alara's hand drifted to the hollow of her throat where a single symbol endured, the silver locket, cool against her skin. It was her mother's heirloom, passed down through generations of forgotten omegas, a delicate chain etched with lunar phases, enclosing a shard of obsidian said to hold the goddess's breath. Inside, a lock of hair, dark as midnight, from the woman who had birthed her in a cave much like this one, under a blood moon that foretold both blessing and curse. "It will guide you when the pack turns blind," her mother had murmured on her deathbed, fingers trembling as she fastened it. Now it swung like a pendulum with each labored step, a faint warmth pulsing against the chill, as if the stone within remembered the fire of life. The wind howled louder, carrying distant uivos that raised the hackles on her neck, rogue wolves perhaps, or the spectral cries of the lost. Ilara's legs trembled, exhaustion weaving through her like venom. She had rationed her meager supplies, a strip of dried venison, a skin of water now frozen solid, but hunger gnawed at her belly, sharp as betrayal. In the pack, she had been the quiet healer, binding wounds with herbs and whispers, her touch easing fevers that baffled the shamans. Yet they saw only fragility in her slight frame, her eyes that dreamed beyond the hunt. "You soften us," Thorn had accused, his breath hot against her ear in their last stolen moment. "And softness invites the blade." She collapsed against a boulder, its surface slick with rime, and drew her knees to her chest. The moon crested higher, bathing the snow in ethereal glow, turning the world to a canvas of silver and shadow. Alara traced the locket's edges, the metal worn smooth by years of faithful wear. What strength did it hold now? The obsidian within seemed to hum faintly, a vibration she felt more in her soul than her fingers, a pull, insistent, toward something unseen. The forest held its breath, even the wind stilled, as if the goddess herself leaned in to listen. Tears froze on her lashes, unspoken prayers to the lunar mother who had forsaken her. In the distance, a crack echoed, like ice splitting or bone, and Alara's pulse quickened. Was it pursuers from Ironfang come to ensure her end, or merely the mountain's indifferent groan? She clutched the locket tighter, its chain biting into her palm, drawing a bead of blood that welled warm and red against the white. The metallic tang mingled with the pine scent, grounding her in the raw pulse of survival. Strength, she thought, was not the roar of the alpha, but this, enduring the freeze, one defiant breath at a time. As night deepened, the howls drew nearer, a chorus that stirred the ancient wild in her veins. Alara rose, the locket's glow faint but unyielding, and pressed on into the storm-swept unknown. Exile was not death, but rebirth's cruel forge, and in its fires she would find her hidden flame. The storm's fury peaked as Alara crested the ridge, her breath ragged plumes that dissolved into the howling gale. The locket at her throat thrummed warmer now, a subtle pulse like a second heartbeat, urging her onward through the veil of swirling snow. The pines had thinned to stunted sentinels, their needles sheathed in ice that cracked like brittle bones under the moon's unyielding gaze. She paused, senses sharpening against the chaos. A scent, faint but unmistakable, threading through the pine and frost. Musk and iron, the tang of blood mingled with the wild earthiness of wolf. Fear coiled in her gut, instinctive as the Omega's flight response, yet curiosity tugged at its edges, sharp as a thorn. She scanned the shadowed hollow below, where moonlight pooled in a frozen stream's bend, illuminating a form slumped against a wind-carved boulder. A man, no, an alpha. Even from this distance his frame spoke of faded power, broad shoulders bowed under a cloak matted with snow and darker stains. He moved feebly, one arm cradling his side, where crimson seeped through fur-trimmed leather, staining the white drifts beneath him. Alara's instincts warred, flee as the exile did, or approach as the healer within her whispered. The locket burned against her skin, its obsidian core vibrating with an urgency that drowned her doubt. She descended the slope, boots slipping on icy scree, the wind whipping her hair like spectral fingers. Closer, the details sharpened, his face, etched by decades of command and sorrow, framed by silver-streaked hair that fell in disheveled waves. Scars crisscrossed his jaw, ancient as the runes on forgotten monoliths, and his eyes, when they lifted to meet hers, gleamed amber in the lunar light, dulled by pain, but piercing with the weight of a crown long worn. "Who?" His voice rasped, low and gravel rough, carrying the echo of thunder long past its prime. He tried to rise, muscles straining against age's betrayal, but collapsed back with a grimace, blood bubbling from lips cracked by cold. Alara froze at arm's length, her own scent betraying her, soft lavender and wild thyme, the mark of an Omega untethered. His nostrils flared, recognition flickering, but not the predatory hunger she feared. Instead, a shadow of wariness crossed his features, mingled with something deeper, like recognition of a half-remembered dream. The connection sparked unbidden, a silken thread pulling at her core, instinctive as the moon's tide on blood. Yet she denied it, rationalizing the pull as mere survival's illusion, born of isolation's cruel jest. "Stay back," he growled, though weakness laced the command, his hand fumbling for a dagger at his belt, hilt worn smooth by years of grip. "I'm no prize for scavengers." She knelt despite herself, the snow soaking through her knees, cold seeping into bone. Up close, the wound gaped. A slash from claw or blade, ragged and deep, festering with the chill. His cloak, once regal with embroidered wolves rampant, hung in tatters, embroidered threads unraveling like forgotten oaths. The air thickened with his scent, dominant yet frayed, evoking memories of Iron Fang's hall, but tempered by melancholy, as if guilt had hollowed him from within. "I'm no scavenger," Alara murmured, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. She unclasped the locket, its chain whispering against her collarbone, and let it dangle, the silver catching moonlight in prismatic shards. The obsidian within seemed to drink the glow, pulsing faintly, as if awakening to his presence. "You're bleeding out. Let me bind it, or the night will claim you." His gaze fixed on the locket, a flicker of awe cutting through the pain, but he shook his head, jaw clenching. "You don't know what you approach, little one. Kings fall hardest." The words carried the weight of confession, his eyes searching hers, not for weakness, but for the spark of something lost. Fear bloomed in her chest, not of his fangs, but of the vulnerability mirrored there, the curiosity that bound them like invisible chains. Why him? Why now, in this forsaken wild? The wind howled anew, carrying distant weavos that spoke of pursuit, rogues or worse, shadows from his past closing in. Alara's hand hovered over his wound, the heat of his blood calling to her healer's touch, even as her mind screamed retreat. The locket swung between them, a bridge of silver and stone, its warmth spreading through her veins like liquid fire. She pressed her palm to the gash, ignoring his weak protest, and felt the first stirrings of empathy pierce the fear. A bond nascent, resisted, yet undeniable. As her fingers worked, tearing strips from her own cloak to staunch the flow, his breath steadied, ragged inhales sinking with hers in the frozen hush. The moon watched, impartial witness, while blood stained the snow red, a stark sigil against the white. In that moment, under the celestial vault, exile met fallen royalty, curiosity kindling what fear sought to extinguish. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The cave's maw yawned before them like a forgotten prayer, its jagged entrance veiled in icicles that wept slow tears into the snow-choked ground. Alara supported the Alpha's weight as they stumbled inside, his arm heavy across her shoulders, each step a labored symphony of grunts and crunching frost. The locket at her throat swung erratically, its obsidian heart now a steady thrum against her skin, as if it sensed the peril nipping at their heels. The wind outside howled its rage, carrying the guttural snarls of pursuers, Stormclaw scouts, their scents sharp with ambition and the reek of fresh-killed prey. They had come for him, the fallen king, driven by old vendettas and the promise of a crownless throne. Ragnar, that was his name, revealed in a pained whisper as she dragged him deeper into the shadows. Once Alpha of the Frostvale realm, his reign etched in ballads of iron will and merciless justice, now reduced to this: a fugitive in his twilight years, strength sapped by age's inexorable thief. His body, once a fortress of muscle and command, betrayed him with every tremor, wounds from battles long past reopening like accusations. Yet in his amber eyes burned a fire undimmed, the wolf's heart Alara glimpsed when her touch met his fevered skin. It stirred something primal in her, a warmth uncoiling low in her belly, resisted as fiercely as the cold that clawed at the cave's threshold. She eased him onto a ledge of packed snow, its surface softened by millennia of glacial breath, and scanned the dim interior. The cave stretched into velvet blackness, walls veined with quartz that caught stray glimmers from the moon filtering through fissures above. A faint draft carried the mineral tang of underground springs, mingled with the metallic bite of his blood still seeping through the makeshift bandage. Ilara's hands moved with the healer's precision, gathering brittle lichen from the walls, Its gray fronds, resilient against the freeze, could staunch infection if boiled. But fire first. Without it, the night would devour them both. Ragnar's gaze followed her, heavy-lidded but watchful, as she scavenged flint from her pouch and struck it against a blade pilfered from his belt. Sparks danced like fireflies in the gloom, finally igniting a nest of dried moss she'd tucked into a crevice. Flames licked upward, tentative at first, then hungry, casting golden flickers across his scarred face. The light revealed more than shadows, the deep furrows of regret around his mouth, the silver threading his beard like frost on ancient pines. He was no young conqueror like Thorn, all brash fury and fleeting passion. Ragnar carried the weight of decades, decisions that had spilled rivers of blood under indifferent moons. Why risk this? His voice rumbled, low as distant thunder, laced with the rasp of pain. He shifted, wincing as the wound pulled, but his hand caught her wrist, gentle, yet unyielding, the touch of an alpha who knew restraint as a harder master than force. An exile like you. The wilds are kinder than my shadow. Ilara met his eyes, the fire's warmth a fragile barrier against the chill seeping from the entrance. Outside, the snarls grew bolder, paws scrabbling over ice, the acrid scent of their torches invading the air. Stormclaw had hunted him for years, ever since the betrayal at Bloodridge Pass, where his mercy toward a rival's whelp had sown seeds of rebellion. Now, with age dulling his claws, they closed in, sensing vulnerability. And her? She was collateral, and Omega's scent a beacon to any wolf with claims to dominance. Fear tightened her throat, but beneath it bloomed empathy, raw and unbidden, the shared fracture of rejection, his guilt mirroring her shame. "Because the goddess doesn't abandon the broken," she replied, her voice steady as she fed twigs to the flames. The fire crackled, spitting embers that mirrored the sparks in her veins where his fingers lingered. She pulled away gently, rationalizing the jolt as the locket's hum, not the instinctive pull of fates entwining. Yet as she boiled water in a hollowed stone, infusing it with lichen and a pinch of willow bark from her satchel, she felt the bond deepen. His presence filled the cave, not with dominance, but with a quiet gravity drawing confessions from the silence. He watched her work, the amber in his eyes softening as steam rose in fragrant curls. "I've broken more than I've mended, girl, my strength. It fled with the winters. What wolf am I now, if not a ghost?" The words hung heavy, philosophy woven into confession, his melancholy a cloak heavier than the tatters on his back. Ilara knelt beside him, dipping cloth into the herbal brew and pressing it to his side. The heat seeped through, drawing a hiss from his lips, but he didn't pull away. Her touch, light as moonlight on water, eased the fever's grip, and in that contact, she felt it, the wolf's heart stirring beneath the ruin of age. A pulse, strong and wild, sinking with her own, as if her omega essence coaxed life from embers long thought cold. The bond shifted then, empathy forging into something visceral. She saw flashes in his gaze, the young king he had been, roaring across frozen tundras. The mate lost to treachery, her blood staining his paws in a war he couldn't prevent. The choices that haunted him, power's cruel calculus where compassion was deemed weakness. And he saw her, Ilara, the quiet dreamer cast out for softness, her hidden fire veiled by exile's frost. "You've a gift," he murmured, his free hand brushing the locket, fingers tracing its lunar etchings. The obsidian warmed under his touch, a revelation humming between them, blood from her earlier cut still flecking its chain like a shared sigil. A howl pierced the night, closer now, followed by the thud of bodies against stone. Ragnar tensed, growling low, his body coiling despite the pain, a protector's instinct unbroken. Ilara's heart raced, but she didn't flee. Instead, she pressed closer, her scent enveloping him like a shield. They were prey together, hunted by shadows of his past and her present, yet in the fire's glow, vulnerability wove them tighter. The cave became sanctuary, its walls echoing their synchronized breaths, the locket a talisman binding fear to fragile trust. As the pursuers' torches flickered at the entrance, casting elongated demons on the snow, Ragnar's hand found hers. Rough palm calloused by crowns and claws. Empathy bloomed into alliance, the first threads of a bond that defied the storm. What was strength, if not two broken souls kindling light against the dark? The moon above filtered through cracks, silvering their refuge, while blood and fire whispered of trials yet to come. In that hush, before the clash, Ilara felt the wolf's heart beat anew, not in conquest, but in the quiet mercy of connection. The flames in the cave's heart danced erratically, their golden tongues licking at the encroaching shadows as the Stormclaw scout's snarls reverberated off the ice-sheathed walls. Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears, a wild drumbeat syncing with Ragnar's labored breaths beside her. His hand still clasped hers, rough and unyielding, a lifeline forged in the crucible of shared peril. The air hung thick with the acrid bite of their torches outside, mingling with the earthy musk of damp stone and the faint, herbal steam rising from the poultice she'd pressed to his wound. Blood scented the space, too, his, dark and coppery, seeping anew through the bandage. Hers, a lingering trace on the locket's chain, where her earlier prick had left a crimson bead frozen in time. She pulled him deeper into the recess, where the cave narrowed to a vein of quartz-veined rock, its surfaces pulsing with faint inner luminescence under the moon's fractured light filtering from above. The locket at her throat burned hotter now, an insistent throb that spread through her chest like roots seeking soil, awakening something long dormant. Fear clawed at her, not just of the hunter's claws scraping closer, but of the unraveling within her, as if exile had cracked open a vessel she never knew she carried. Ragnar's amber eyes locked on hers, fierce despite the pallor etching his features. His body coiled like a spring robbed of its tension by age's thief. "Stay behind me," he growled, voice a gravelly rumble that vibrated through her bones. He rose unsteadily, drawing his dagger with a hand that trembled not from weakness alone, but from the ghosts of battles where mercy had cost him dearly. The wound pulled taut, fresh blood welling, staining his tattered cloak in deeper crimson blooms. Outside, the lead scout's howl split the night, a triumphant bay that promised violence under the moon's watchful sickle. Ilara's instincts screamed to flee, to dissolve into the shadows as Omegas were taught, but the locket's hum drowned it, pulling her forward instead, toward him, toward the fray. As the first Stormclaw burst through the entrance, a hulking beta with fur-matted armor and eyes gleaming feral yellow, Ragnar lunged. His strike was true, but slowed, the blade glancing off the scout's pauldron in a shower of sparks. The beta countered with a swipe that raked Ragnar's shoulder, drawing blood that sprayed hot across Ilara's cheek. Warm, metallic, a visceral splash against the cave's chill. Pain lanced through Ragnar. He staggered, the wolf's heart in him roaring defiance even as his body faltered. Ilara cried out, the sound raw and unbidden, her hand flying to the locket. In that instant, the obsidian within ignited, not with flame, but with a surge of light, silver blue and ethereal. Spilling from its facets like moonlight, condensed to liquid. The glow enveloped her palm as she reached for Ragnar, her touch landing on his bloodied shoulder. Time fractured. Visions cascaded through her mind's eye, unbidden and vivid. Not memories, but revelations, threads of destiny woven by the goddess's loom. She saw Ragnar in his prime, a young king atop Frostvale's throne, his crown of antler and iron gleaming under a blood moon. Mercy had defined him then, sparing the Stormclaw heir at Bloodridge Pass, a whelp whose life he claimed in pity, only for that act to ignite the betrayal that toppled his realm. Guilt shadowed every frame. Rivers of pack blood spilled in the wars that followed, his mate's throat torn in the uprising, her final gaze accusing as life ebbed from her eyes. Age had stolen his strength, but deeper still, a curse lingered, imposed by the lunar shamans for his weakness, binding his wolf spirit to fade, ensuring no redemption without a true key. And then her, Ilara, not as the frail exile, but as the pathfinder, born under that same blood moon in her mother's cave. The locket's obsidian, a shard from the goddess's own tear, pulsed with her hidden gift, the sight to trace lost paths, to heal not just flesh, but the fractures of fate. In the vision, she stood beside him, her touch unraveling the curse's coils, revealing the hidden trail through the northern wastes, a sanctuary where Frostvale's true loyalists waited, ready to reclaim the throne if the fallen king proved worthy. Her blood on the chain mingled with his in the ether, forging a sigil, Omega and Alpha, rejection and guilt, entwined as the key to rebirth. The vision shattered as reality crashed back. The scout lunged again, but Ilara's voice emerged, not a whisper, but a command laced with lunar power. Enough! The word resonated, the cave's quartz veins amplifying it into a sonic wave that hurled the beta back against the wall, his body crumpling with a crack of bone. The other pursuers faltered at the entrance, their howls turning to whimpers, eyes wide with superstitious dread, the glow from her locket casting her in divine silhouette, snowflakes swirling inward like summoned spirits. Ragnar stared at her, breath heaving, the amber in his eyes alight with dawning awe. He sank to one knee, not in defeat, but reverence, his bloodied hand reaching to cup her face, thumb tracing the crimson streak on her cheek. You, the light in the dark. The prophecy spoke of a wanderer with the moon's breath, one who sees the paths kings blind themselves to. His voice cracked, melancholy yielding to wonder, the weight of decades lifting like fog before dawn. She was the key, not to mere survival, but to his soul's absolution, the Omega whose touch reignited the wolf's heart, proving that strength reborn lay in compassion's embrace. Ilara trembled, the power ebbing, leaving her hollow yet alive, the locket cooling to a gentle pulse. Outside, the scouts retreated into the storm, their tails low, whispers of goddess touched, trailing on the wind. But the revelation hung between them, heavy as unspoken oaths, her gift a double-edged blade, binding her to his destiny, forcing choices where freedom once beckoned. What was redemption, if not the terror of becoming essential? The fire crackled softly, blood pooling in the snow like spilled secrets, while the moon above bore witness to fates converging in the hush, like if you believe rejection can become destiny. The dawn bled crimson across the snowfields, a wound in the sky that mirrored the stains on Ragnar's cloak as they emerged from the cave's shadowed womb. Ilara's legs ached from the night's vigil, her body a vessel hollowed by the revelation's surge, yet the locket at her throat thrummed with renewed purpose, its obsidian core a compass pointing inexorably northward. Ragnar walked beside her now, his stride steadier under the moon's fading grace, though age's shadow clung to him like frost, each step a quiet defiance against the curse that had dimmed his wolf's fire. Her touch had kindled it anew, not as a lover's caress, but as the healer's grace, weaving empathy into the sinews of his fading strength. Yet the bond resisted her still, rationalized as duty's chain, not destiny's embrace. She was no queen to a fallen king, only a wanderer lending light to his dark. The northern wastes unfolded before them, a labyrinth of ice-rimed ridges and frozen tarns where the wind keened like morning kin. Distant howls threaded the air, not the wild chorus of rogues but the disciplined bay of a pack on the hunt. Stormclaw, emboldened by their scouts' retreat, now converging with purpose. Ragnar's scent sharpened, musk laced with the iron tang of resolve as he scanned the horizon. "They come for the kill," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the chill, amber eyes hardening to flint. "The traitor leads them. Cale, my once brother, who twisted my mercy at Bloodridge into treason's blade. He covets the throne, and with it, the Frostvale's heart." Alara's pulse quickened, the locket warming against her skin as if sensing the convergence of paths. Visions flickered at the edges of her sight, fragments from the night's awakening. Cale's face, scarred and snarling, his betrayal born not of ambition alone, but of resentment for Ragnar's choices, the sparing of lives that spared no one from war's toll. And woven through it, glimpses of her own past. Ironfang's gates, Thorn's averted gaze, the woven bracelets snapped like fragile bone. The packs were entwined in this frost-bitten web, Stormclaw's rivalry bleeding into Ironfang's borders, exiles like her fodder for their games. Freedom whispered in her blood, the wild's call to vanish into the snow, unburdened by kings and curses. Yet love's shadow stirred, resisted, in the warmth of Ragnar's nearness, his guilt a mirror to her rejection, promising redemption if she dared claim it. They crested a bluff overlooking a vast glacial plain where the ice gleamed like shattered silver under the rising sun. There, the confrontation unfolded in brutal tableau. Two packs arrayed in opposition, banners of fur and iron fluttering in the gale. Stormclaw dominated the field, their warriors a sea of gray pelts and steel. Cale at their fore, a towering beta turned usurper, his pelt streaked with the white of false age, eyes burning with the zeal of the betrayed. Flanking them, to Ilara's horror, stood Ironfang's ranks, Thorn's lithe form among them, his new consort at his side, her gaze triumphant as if exile's erasure had sealed their alliance. Betrayal's threads tightened. Cale had forged pacts with her former pack, promising spoils from Frostvale's fall in exchange for aid in Ragnar's end. The air thickened with scents, dominance's roar, fear's undercurrent, the sharp bite of oiled blades ready for blood. Ragnar halted at the bluff's edge, his frame silhouetted against the crimson dawn, the wind tearing at his tattered cloak to reveal scars like ancient runes. A howl escaped him, not of rage but sorrow, echoing across the plain and drawing all eyes upward. Cale's head snapped up, his snarl twisting into recognition, then malice. "The ghost returns," he bellowed, voice carrying like thunder over the ice, his warriors shifting with predatory grace. "Age has stripped you bare, brother, your mercy a noose we all wear. Surrender the realm, or we'll paint this snow with what remains of your line." Thorn's gaze found Alara then, narrowing in surprise and something darker. Regret? Possession? He stepped forward, flanked by his enforcers, the woven bracelets on their wrists mocking her bare skin. "Exile," he called, his tone laced with false command. "You meddle in kings' wars. Return to the wilds or join the fallen." The words stung like claws renewed, reopening the wound of banishment, her Omega spirit flinching under the weight of old shame. Freedom beckoned sharper now. Slip away, let these alphas devour each other, reclaim the solitude where no bond could bind her. But Ragnar's hand found hers, rough palm enveloping her fingers, the contact sending a jolt through the locket that bloomed warmth in her chest. "No," he said softly, for her ears alone, his melancholy gaze meeting hers. "This is the judgment I fled, the choice between war's blade and forgiveness's folly. I've spilled blood for thrones, lost all I loved to pride's shadow. If you walk with me, little pathfinder, teach me mercy's strength." His words pierced, philosophy etched in pain. What was power, if not the courage to forgive the traitor, to offer peace where vengeance howled? Yet war loomed, the packs advancing, howls rising in a cacophony that shook the snow from ledges. Alara's vision surged again, the locket flaring silver blue, revealing the crossroads, a hidden path through the ice, leading to Frostvale's loyalists, but only if Ragnar renounced the crown's curse through absolution. "Forgive Kyle, and the bond with her could heal the realm. Wage war and age would claim him fully, her gift wasted on a pyre of pride. Love or liberty? His redemption demanded her choice, tying her fate to his, freedom sacrificed for the fragile throne of compassion. Tears froze on her lashes as the first arrows whistled past, embedding in snow with feathered thuds. Thorn's warriors charged, Stormclaw meeting them in a clash of fang and steel, blood spraying hot and red against the white, the metallic reek mingling with pine and frost. She clutched the locket, its chain biting into her palm, drawing fresh blood that trickled warm down her wrist. Ragnar drew his dagger, body tensing for the fray, but his eyes pleaded, "Choose with me." The wind howled judgment, the moon's echo in daylight as Alara stepped forward, her voice rising not in fear, but resolve. "Enough," she intoned, the word amplified by the obsidian's power, rippling across the plain like a lunar wave. Warriors faltered, Kale's advance halting, Thorn's snarl twisting in confusion. The moral precipice yawned. Forgiveness might crown them in light or shatter all in war's embrace. In that suspended breath, blood pooling at their feet like spilled oaths, Ilara felt the dilemma's weight, her heart torn between the wild's freedom and the redemptive fire of love under a sky that demanded her soul's verdict. The glacial plain trembled under the weight of halted fury, the air thick with the coppery reek of drawn blood and the acrid tang of fear sweat from warriors frozen mid-stride. Ilara stood at the bluff's crumbling edge, her voice's echo still rippling like silver ripples across a frozen tarn, the locket at her throat pulsing with a light that bathed the scene in ethereal azure. Snowflakes swirled in unnatural eddies around her, drawn by the obsidian's call, as if the goddess herself exhaled through the stone, weaving mercy's fragile veil over the chaos. Ragnar's hand tightened in hers, his rough palm an anchor against the vertigo of choice, his amber eyes locked on her with a faith that pierced deeper than any blade. Age had hollowed him, yet in this moment, her touch, innocent, insistent, stirred the wolf's heart within, a primal rhythm syncing with her own, defiant against the curse's fading grip. Kale's snarl fractured the silence first, his massive frame heaving as he shook off the compulsion, yellow eyes blazing with the venom of thwarted ambition. "Witchcraft," he spat, voice booming across the ice like cracking flows, his claws flexing in the snow, leaving furrows dark with intent. Behind him, Stormclaw warriors shifted uneasily, their gray pelts bristling, while Ironfang's ranks, Thorn at their vanguard, murmured in superstitious dread, the Alpha's face twisting between rage and reluctant awe. Thorn's gaze bored into Ilara, a storm of possession and regret, his new consort's hand clutching his arm as if to anchor him from the pull of what he'd discarded. The woven bracelets on their wrists glinted mockingly, symbols of bonds forged in rejection's wake, now paling before the locket's glow. Ilara's chest heaved, the wind whipping her hair like lunar banners, carrying the chill that seeped into her bones, yet could not touch the fire blooming within. Visions cascaded once more, unbidden, the hidden path unveiled in her mind's eye. A vein of blue ice snaking northward through the wastes, leading to Frostvale's sanctum where loyalists slumbered in enchanted frost, awaiting their king's redemptive roar. But the crossroads demanded sacrifice, not of blood alone, but of self. Forgive Kale, and Ragnar's curse would shatter, his strength reborn through her union, the pax bending to a throne of compassion. Wage war, and liberty claimed her, the wild swallowing her whole, unyoked but forever shadowed by what might have healed. Love resisted still, rationalized as the healer's oath, yet it tugged like the locket's chain, binding guilt to grace, exile to crown. Ragnar stepped forward, his body a bastion beside her, the wound at his side seeping fresh crimson that stained the snow in ritual patterns, mirroring the blood moon of her birth. "Kyle," he called, voice steady as ancient oaks in gale, carrying the melancholy timbre of decades' regret. Brother in blood, if not in spirit, your betrayal was my folly's fruit. I spared you at Bloodridge not from weakness, but from the sight of a future I could not bear. More graves under indifferent moons. Take the throne if it poisons you, but spare this field. Let mercy be our legacy, not another river red. The words hung, philosophy carved in vulnerability, his free hand extended palm up, empty of weapon, an offering that bared the scars of old wars, claws from foes, burns from pyres of the fallen. Cale faltered, his snarl dissolving into a guttural whine, the zeal in his eyes cracking like thin ice under the weight of memory. Flashes crossed his face. The whelp spared, now twisted into the usurper. The wars Ragnar's compassion had unwittingly fueled, costing Cale's own kin in the crossfire. The packs stilled, breaths collective and ragged, the wind's howl the only sound as the moral precipice teetered. Thorn, too, wavered, his enforcer's grips loosening on hilts. The alliance's fragility exposed, ambitions packed crumbling before the lunar light that crowned Alara in divine silhouette. Her heart tore, the dilemma's blade twisting. Freedom's wild call, solitary and pure, or the redemptive union that demanded her essence, binding Omega to fallen king in a dance of fates. The locket burned, obsidian humming with the goddess's whisper. What is strength, if not choosing the wound that heals? Tears traced frozen paths down her cheeks, warm against the frost, as she released Ragnar's hand and stepped into the void between armies. No more blood, she intoned, voice amplified to a celestial timbre. The light from the locket surging outward in tendrils that wrapped the plain like silken chains. Visions bloomed for all, paths of peace unfurling, Frostveil rising not in conquest, but alliance, rejections mended into rebirths. Kyle dropped to his knees, head bowed, the fight leaching from him like meltwater. Thorn turned away, shame etching his features, his consort pulling him back as Ironfang retreated into the swirling snow. Ragnar caught her as she swayed, the power's ebb leaving her trembling in his arms, his embrace a fortress of warmth against the dawn's creeping cold. The curse fractured then, a visceral snap in her senses, the wolf's heart in him roaring full-throated, strength flooding his veins like spring thaw, age's thief banished by her touch's grace. He pressed his forehead to hers, breath mingling in plumes of shared life, the bond accepted at last. Not immediate passion, but a slow-burning union, love as proof forged in choice's fire. You are my redemption, Pathfinder, he murmured, voice rich with renewed timbre, his lips brushing her temple in tender reverence. Blood from his wounds mingled with hers on the locket's chain, sealing the sigil, sacrifice yielding cure, exile birthing queenship. The packs dispersed under the crimson sky, howls turning to songs of uneasy truce, the glacial plain a canvas wiped clean save for crimson sigils fading into melt. Ilara leaned into him, the wild's call silenced by the pulse of destiny claimed, her hidden flame no longer veiled, but shared. Under the moon's watchful descent, they turned northward, the path unfolding like a lover's promise, renascence in every step, where rejection's frost yielded to the eternal warmth of healed hearts. The wind whispered benedictions, fire in their veins, blood as oath, the goddess smiling upon the union that proved love's true throne. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.